For 2,000 years, a limestone cliff in southern France has been holding a secret that renders our modern energy grid obsolete. If you look at the rocks of Barbegal today, you will see thick, rhythmic layers of carbonate center clinging to the ruins. To a geologist, these are just mineral deposits, a byproduct of water and stone. But to the archivist, these are the literal flight recorder of a suppressed industrial age. These layers are the physical receipts of an empire. They prove that while the rest of the world was allegedly in a primitive state, the Romans were running a high-torque, industrial power plant that operated with 80% efficiency, nearly triple the thermal efficiency of the internal combustion engine in your car. They didn't just harness the water, they enslaved gravity itself. And they did it without a single wire, a single watt, or a single recurring invoice. This is the Barbegal Cascade. It was a 16-wheel hydraulic engine carved directly into the bones of the earth. It didn't just grind grain, it generated a level of mechanical baseload power that wouldn't be seen again until the height of the Victorian era. But as the empire faded, the blueprint was buried, not because it failed, but because a civilization that can harvest its own mechanical energy from the landscape is a civilization that cannot be easily controlled through debt. The Barbegal site, located near Arles, represents a pinnacle of fluid dynamics that we have been conditioned to forget. While modern green energy tells you to buy fragile silicon panels from overseas, the Romans looked at a single aqueduct and saw a gravity battery. They directed that water into a series of 8 pairs of overshot wheels, stacked like a staircase down a 65-foot incline. To understand the scale of this engineering, we have to look at the aqueduct of Arles. This wasn't just a pipe, it was a 30-mile-long precision instrument. It maintained a gradient of only a few inches per mile, only to intentionally break that gradient at Barbegal to create a massive drop of potential energy. The Romans were effectively storing the kinetic energy of 30 miles of moving water and releasing it all at once against the blades of 16 wheels. The precision required for this is staggering. Modern survey teams have analyzed the Cap Aron and Igaliers aqueducts that fed this site. They discovered that the Romans were calculating flow rates with a margin of error of less than 1%. They weren't just moving water, they were managing pressure. They used the Venturi effect in their lead siphon transitions and designed specialized settling tanks to ensure that the water hitting the wooden wheels was free of the debris that would cause mechanical failure. This wasn't a village mill. It was an industrial factory, a centralized processing hub for an entire province. Research conducted by the University of Mainz in 2020 utilized the carbonate center to prove that these wheels ran at a near-constant RPM for over 2 centuries. They analyzed the isotope signatures within the limescale to track the seasonal flow rates. They found that even during the dry summer months, the Romans utilized a sophisticated system of upstream dams to buffer the flow. The conclusion? The plant was engineered to be self-regulating. The math is undeniable. Barbegal produced 4.5 tons of flour every 24 hours. To match that output today without electricity, you would need an army of 300 men working in total, perfect synchronicity. The Romans did it with the weight of the water and the silence of the stone. But look at the energy theft that occurred in the 19th century. As the Industrial Revolution took hold, we were presented with a choice. Stay with the Barbegal model of decentralized, water-powered autonomy, or move to the steam model of centralized, coal-fired dependence. Historian Andreas Malm's research into fossil capital reveals the dark truth: the early British textile mills were actually moving away from water, even though water was cheaper and more powerful. The choice was never about efficiency. It was about geography and control. A water wheel is tethered to the river, to the commons. You cannot move the river to the city, and you cannot charge a man for the gravity that turns his wheel. Coal, however, could be put on a train. It could be stockpiled. It could be metered. We traded the eternal flow for the combustion build because the masters of the New Age couldn't find a way to put a padlock on the Barbegal cliffside. They needed a fuel that could be owned, transported, and withheld. Steam power wasn't an upgrade in physics, it was an upgrade in the ability to subjugate labor. By moving production away from the river, they moved the worker into the slum, and the energy source into the vault. To reclaim this energetics, we have to look at the three mathematical pillars the Romans mastered: the head, the sluice, and the residual. First, the head. This is the vertical fall. The Romans didn't just look for water, they looked for potential energy. By building the Barbegal at the steepest point of the Arles aqueduct, they maximized the torque. In modern terms, they were creating a high-voltage mechanical system. While an undershot wheel, one that sits in a flat river, only captures about 20% of the energy. The overshot wheel at Barbegal uses the actual weight of the water in the buckets to pull the wheel down. Every foot of drop is a volt of pressure. If you have a stream on your land with even a 5-foot drop, you are sitting on a potential that the grid wants you to ignore. Second, the sluice. The Romans were the first to master the forebay, a holding tank at the top of the cliff that acted as a hydraulic capacitor. It leveled out the noise of the stream. In electronics, a capacitor smooths out voltage spikes. In Roman hydraulics, the forebay smoothed out flow spikes. By using specialized overflow channels, the Romans ensured that the wheels were never overwhelmed by sudden surges, yet never starved for pressure. Whether it was a spring flood or a summer drought, the wheels at Barbegal turned at the same precise, industrial speed. This is grid stability without a single computer chip or sensor. Third, the residual. This is the secret of the 16 wheels. Most people see a water wheel as a one-and-done event. But the Romans understood the law of residual energy. The water that left the first pair of wheels still had the majority of its mass and velocity. By cascading it down 16 levels, they used the same gallon of water 16 times. It is the ultimate closed-loop system. They were practicing energy recycling 1800 years before the term was invented. They realized that gravity is a constant, it doesn't deplete as it works. As long as the mass of the water remains, the potential for work remains. But the most suppressed part of the Barbegal story isn't the wheels, it's the gearing. The Romans used lantern pinions and right-angle gears carved from seasoned maple and oak. These weren't primitive wooden cogs, they were modular components designed for 24/7 industrial uptime. They used a mathematical ratio of approximately 5:1, meaning one slow, high-torque rotation of the massive water will translate it into 5 high-speed rotations of the millstone. We know from the writings of Vitruvius that these gears were often faced with bronze or lubricated with animal fats to reach speeds of 50 to 60 RPMs at the millstone. This is high-precision manufacturing. They used sacrificial teeth in their gear designs, easily replaceable wooden pegs that would snap if the system jammed, protecting the main drive shaft from catastrophic failure. This is the same principle as a modern fuse or circuit breaker. They proved that a civilization can have industrial-scale output without a globalized supply chain. They built a power plant out of the forest and the mountain. Compare this to the 2026 energy trap. We are told that independence means buying $20,000 worth of lithium batteries that will inevitably degrade in a decade. We are told we need smart meters and AI-driven optimization just to keep the lights on. It is a lie designed to keep you a user instead of an owner. The modern system is designed to be fragile, relying on rare earth minerals mined in conflict zones and processed in high-heat chemical factories. The Roman system was designed to be eternal, using nothing but carbon-sequestering timber and locally quarried stone. The Barbegal archive tells us that a permanent, century-scale power system can be built from timber, stone, and gravity. A water turbine doesn't need a Chinese silicon mine. It doesn't need a software patch from a Silicon Valley server. It only requires a river and a blueprint. It is a technology that honors the Earth's physics instead of raping its crust for rare earth minerals. Consider the life cycle of a solar panel. It is born in a furnace and dies in a landfill. The Barbegal wheels were born in a grove and, after decades of service, were returned to the Earth as mulch. This is the only true sustainable energy. Today, the modern Barbegal is reappearing under the name microhydro. Tiny, 500-watt turbines, some small enough to fit in a backpack, are powering off-grid homesteads for the cost of a single tank of gas. These devices use the same Pelton and Turgot wheel geometries that the Romans pioneered. They are the direct descendants of the Barbegal Cascade. But you won't see this in the green energy commercials. They want you to stay on the wire. They want you to believe that power is something that arrives in a cable from a distant, unknown source. They want you to believe that you are incapable of generating your own force. We are building this archive to ensure the gravity drive is never erased again. We are connecting the dots between the air well for water, the air potato for food, and the Barbegal Cascade for the power to process them. These three systems form a closed loop of human existence. When you own your water, your food, and your power, the system becomes an option rather than a requirement. You move from being a consumer to being a producer. You move from being a subject to being a steward. The Barbegal Cascade is a reminder that we aren't progressing toward more power, we are waking up from a long, expensive sleep. The Romans didn't need the grid because they understood that true power isn't something you buy, it's something you direct. They didn't see an environment to be protected, they saw an engine to be partnered with. They understood that the Earth is a high-energy system, and the only thing lacking is the geometry to harvest it. Think about the architecture of your own life. How many of your daily needs are met by systems you don't understand and cannot repair? We have traded our competence for convenience. The Barbegal was built so that a local carpenter and a local stonemason could keep an entire city fed. It was human-scale industry. It was a technology that empowered the community rather than the corporation. If a gear broke, the village woodworker fixed it. If the flume leaked, the mason patched it. There was no customer support because there were no customers, only participants. Stop looking at the landscape as scenery and start looking at it as potential. The cliffside at Arles is still there. The gravity is still pulling. The water is still waiting to work. We must realize that every hill is a battery, and every stream is a fuel line. The only thing missing is the person with the courage to build the wheel and the wisdom to walk away from the meter. We have been convinced that we are small and helpless, but the ruins of Barbegal prove that with a little bit of geometry and a lot of grit, we can move mountains. We have been taught to fear the primitive, but the primitive Roman had more energy security than the modern citizen. They had a power plant that didn't care about oil prices, geopolitical wars, or cyber attacks. It didn't care about the stock market or the stability of the dollar. It only cared about the rain and the slope of the land. It was a system built on the laws of physics, which are the only laws that cannot be repealed by a politician or a CEO. The engineers of Arles knew something we've forgotten, that nature isn't just something to be looked at, it's something to be lived within. They didn't build against the cliff, they built with it. They used the natural contours of the limestone to support the massive weight of the mills. They used the local clay to seal the conduits. They lived in a state of thermodynamic harmony that we are only now beginning to realize we need. If you are ready to stop renting your existence and start directing your environment, if you are ready to trade the wire for the wheel, subscribe. We are reclaiming the energetics they tried to bury. We are unearthing the blueprints of the independent. We are building a future that looks a lot more like the past than the experts want to admit. The archive is open. The wheels are turning. The harvest begins now.